y'all, it's Barbara from Divine Creative Love. In this video, I'm going to show you how you can do distress inks in your journaling Bible. So I chose Psalm 61. Actually, I had just last week had my wisdom teeth out, and it's been kind of a rough week. So I really wanted to journal on a psalm that would remind me that God is my refuge and really just take my mind off of the drama that's been going on this week. So I really love verses 2 and 3. David says, "Lead me to the rock that is higher than I, for you have been my refuge, a strong tower against the foe." And then in verse 8, he says, "Then I will ever sing in praise of your name and fulfill my vows day after day." So I've got this Sweet and Sassy stamp set that has the words rock and refuge in it. And I'm using the distress ink in the peacock feathers color, which is kind of a turquoise blue. And I'm going to be using a similar technique to this Psalm 19 page that I did. The background is the distress ink, and then I used acrylic paint over the side of the page. So the first thing you need to know about using the distress ink is that it blends a whole lot better on top of a page that's been gessoed. So I like to gesso my page because without the gesso it just really won't blend as well. You can see when I first put the ink on the page, the blending tool leaves a little circle, and without the gesso that ink would just stay put and you'd have like circle marks on the page, and it just doesn't want to blend very well. But on top of the gesso, it just blends really beautifully. So I highly recommend using the gesso first before you put the distress ink on the page. And the next thing that you need to know about the distress ink is that when it's on top of a gessoed page, the drawback is that it lifts off really easily at first. It takes it a few hours to dry, so you'll need to be very careful with it and not trying to smudge it. You'll notice there are several times in this video that I accidentally got my fingers on it and it lifted off of the page. But it is really easy to fix. If you accidentally smudge it, just go back in with some more ink and blend it, and it's fine. I won't take care of the ink stains on your fingers, but it'll fix the page. One thing that I really love about distress inks is that they're so translucent. You can see how it leaves a really beautiful color on the page, but it doesn't cover up the Bible text at all. Even when you go back in and add like a darker layer, and you can just keep layering and layering, and you can even go in with more than one color, like say I could do blue and purple or red and orange. You can wait for one layer to dry and then go in and build on top of it with another layer. So you can make it as dark as you want, really. And in this case, I'm leaving the text of Psalm 61 lighter than the rest of the page. So I'm going back in and just making the rest of the page a little bit darker. And I always try to use my heat tool to dry it a little bit, but like I said, with the distress ink, for whatever reason, it doesn't dry very easily. So it was still prone to being smudged. So the next thing I'm doing is using the folk art acrylic paint in the margin of the page. And I like to use this glazing liquid to thin out the paint a little bit. You could also use water, and I just use a little bit in this case to make it a little thinner and easier to work with. But if you were going to use the paint to cover up or paint over the Bible text, I recommend using a lot of either the glazing liquid or the water to thin it out, to make sure that it won't cover up the Bible text, that it'll be transparent enough. But in this case it didn't matter because I'm just using it in the margin. And I'm just using the Illustrated Faith Paint It cards to smear the paint on there, which gives it kind of a like rough, abstract look. But you could use a paintbrush to apply it if you wanted to. And you can see there where I accidentally put my fingers on the bottom of the page and lifted off some of that distress ink. I kept forgetting that it comes off so easily. So with that being done, and I actually got a little paint on the back of the page, I went ahead and dried it with the heat tool, which does work really well to dry the acrylic paint, unlike the distress ink. The distress ink will dry like maybe after a few hours, but for whatever reason it just doesn't dry very well with the heat tool. So there I went back in and touched up the spots that I got my fingerprints on. And then I decided I wanted to go back over that margin again with some darker purple. It actually looks kind of blue against that turquoisey background. So I wanted the purple to show up a lot more and be like a darker, more saturated color. So I just went over it again. And in case you're wondering, it's the color that I'm using in the paint is the Folk Art Perfect Purple. See, going back over it made it so much more saturated than before. And I had accidentally lifted off more ink. Like, oops, I keep forgetting. But that's okay, it's easy to touch up. So now that that's dry, it's ready for stamping. So I'm just going to choose the cross from this stamp set. And I apologize, I don't remember the brand name of that stamp set. I've had it for a long time. This one is a Sweet and Sassy stamp set. It's the Mighty Fortress set. So I'm taking the You Are My Rock from that stamp set, and then I'm also using the Armor of God stamp set from Sweet and Sassy Stamps that has the words my and. So I can have it say You Are My Rock and then I'll take that word refuge from the Mighty Fortress set. So, You Are My Rock and My Refuge. And then I decided to move them down to the center of the page. And then I'm going to use the Delicata gold ink to stamp with. It's a really pretty shimmery gold ink. Shows up really well on dark colors. And then I just use the damp paper towel to clean off the stamps. You can see how shimmery that is. and I'm just stamping them one stamp at a time. But you could always pick up multiple stamps with your stamp block and do them all at once if you like. I just prefer to do them one at a time for better positioning. And here I was just touching up the ink a little bit more. And for these words and my, I decided to pick them both up just so I could better center them together. And I didn't quite like how the gold ink showed up on that purple. It wasn't as contrasting as I'd hoped it would be. So I decided to go in with my Una Posca gold paint pen and make it pop a little more. So you can still see it with that gold stamped ink, but it just really jumps off the page with the gold paint pen. One of the things that I always do with my journaling pages is I always outline or underline or otherwise emphasize the verses. So I'm underlining the part of verse 2 and verse 3 and then verse 8 with the Tombow twin tone pen. Here I was thinking about adding the date at the bottom, and at first I decided to use glitter gel pens, and I was looking for one that didn't quite jump out as much as the gold, but you'll see here in a second I was choosing two different colors and neither of them worked out very well. This one didn't show up hardly at all. And there was a blue one that didn't show up, and I just ended up wiping them off and starting over. See, the green one didn't work. You just barely see it. So after further consideration, I ended up just going back and getting the gold paint pen again. What the heck, I'll just put the date in that gold paint pen. It shows up so well. And then I decided I wanted to add a little bit of silver to the cross. So I actually had a silver paint pen that I hadn't ever used before. So when it's brand new, you gotta shake it up really good and then press it down to the paper until the ink starts to flow, which sometimes takes a minute. And then I just went in and added the silver around the cross. So the last step, I just took off all of the protective paper that I was using. I usually use deli paper to protect the pages with attached it with removable scrapbooking tape, which is easily removable. It just takes a little bit to get it started. And the deli paper works really well because it's already sized, just the right size for the Bible pages. So there you go. That is one way to use distress inks in your journaling Bible. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like it, please subscribe to my channel so you won't miss any of my future videos. Bye!